This presentation comes in three parts. First, I will look at the different types of garden that we all have and how we can make them more wildlife friendly. Then I will look briefly at how we can improve the habitat for wildlife through artificial homes. And finally, I will talk about the different ways that we can feed the birds and the different requirements that various birds have. Rewilding. We hear great news about the way some places are, in a sense, rolling back the years and reintroducing lost species and helping out some of our endangered ones. The rewilding that makes the news is often done on quite a large scale, like the successful breeding of storks at the Neb estate in Sussex earlier this year. This talk is about how we can do our bit, albeit on a smaller scale. It doesn't matter how small your patch is. Wildlife doesn't see boundaries in the same way as we do. The other side of the fence is just another habitat, perhaps complementing your habitat. If you have a small garden, use tubs, pots and hanging baskets. Arrange them in different shapes, sizes and heights and fill with plants of varying structure. This mimics the variation found in nature. Perhaps some climbers and small shrubs. Climbers take up little space against a wall, and when grown over a railing, they act as a windshield and reduce the drying effect on other plants in the tubs. You could squeeze in a few vegetables, if you can. You may be able to grow a small tree of a dwarf variety. Of course, much of what I say about small gardens applies equally to the bigger ones. If your garden is covered with hard standing, perhaps for parking, you can improve it by adding plants in containers and maybe removing some of the existing surface to allow further planting and natural drainage. At this stage I should mention that throughout this presentation I've tried to use my own pictures. Other pictures will be acknowledged. I should also mention that most of the gardening mentioned in this presentation has been done by Carol. A water feature is important no matter how small. Any kind will do, even old sinks. With all water features, make sure there's a sloping edge for easy access and escape. Creating even the smallest of all water features can be beneficial to wildlife. A small plantar-sized water feature can provide refuge for aquatic insects within a comparatively short space of time and offer somewhere for wildlife to drink and bathe. Many aquatic insects mature into flying adults and form an important food item for birds and other wildlife. A pond should be located in a warm, sunny spot. Frogs might well be extinct by now if it weren't for garden ponds. They were very important in the 1960s when frogs suffered serious decline. Dragonflies and damselflies breed in ponds. A healthy pond will include pond skaters, water beetles, pond snails, leeches and many others. A large garden may permit an ambitious water feature, pond or bog garden. Avoid invasive water plants and remember that fish stocks will reduce aquatic wildlife. A bit of mud is good, allowing song thrushes, blackbirds, house martins and swallows to collect it for their nests. It also gives insects somewhere to bask. In this image, the water is a little low. The picture was taken during a period of drought. Don't worry too much if this happens. Most plants can cope with this, and some insects benefit from such situations. If you need to top it up, it should be topped up with rainwater. Only use tap water as a last resort. When planting, use native plants. This is my pond during a recent clean-up operation. Notice the butyl liner, how it shelves and, as already mentioned, at least one side should have a sloping edge. After a period of time, you might be lucky enough to have amphibians taking up residence. I pictured these two during a recent clean-up. A source of dead and decaying wood is really valuable for wildlife. It provides a home for fungi, lichens and many kinds of invertebrates that, in turn, are fed upon by other wildlife. In a small garden, an old bucket filled with a mix of wood chippings and soil is a simple way of providing this. In larger gardens, large diameter pieces with bark attached are best and should be left where possible in direct contact with the soil or even part buried. This is a recently started wood pile. We had a privet bush that we no longer wanted, and rather than take it all to the amenity tip, we put this pile in a disused corner of the garden. Larger gardens offer greater opportunities to leave standing deadwood, which is important for invertebrates and birds. This is the remains of an old unproductive pear tree in our garden. We've left logs from this tree all over the garden. They'll rot down over time, giving a home for invertebrates and fungi. I think the main thrust of what I'm saying is that over-tidy gardens are not great for wildlife. At least that's what I tell Carol whenever she insists on me cutting the lawn. Time maintenance with care. For example, if you tidy up and trim immediately after plants have flowered, birds can't use the seeds, so consider letting them die back naturally. A compost bin is very useful if you have the space. An old cardboard box will do. It will rot down. If you have a lawn, allow an area of grass to grow longer between late August and late March. To improve your lawn, increase the minimum height of your grass to between 1.5 inches to 2 inches. Longer grass helps to retain humidity and soil moisture. This will benefit both wildlife and the grass itself. In moist, warm weather, you may need to cut the grass every week. In dry weather, cutting every 2 to 3 weeks reduces drought stress and keeps the grass green for longer. Maximise the value of your lawn by leaving part of it uncut from late May onwards. The exact timing depends on prevailing weather conditions. In dry weather, you can stop cutting even earlier in the year. In larger gardens, create a lawn with varying lengths of grass year-round. While birds like to feed mainly in shorter grass, long grass is beneficial in providing seeds and additional insect foods. Curved edges between lawns and borders increase the length of the edge habitat, allowing a greater variety of plants to thrive. This improves the opportunities for insects to feed on nectar and on other insects. Long grass is best grown against a shrub border. This helps protect the shrubbery from dry winds and increase humidity beneath it. Medium-sized gardens can support small trees and mid-sized shrubs. Try to use native species. Grow herbs and small nectar-rich plants in the cracks between paving slabs. Low, sprawling varieties create humid conditions underneath them, which is good for insects. I saw this at RH's Wisley a couple of years ago. Sadly, when I got to the shop, they had none of the low-grown plants available. I've yet to pull up our lawn. Think about the birds and the bees. Choose plants that provide sources of nectar, fruit and cover. This is a cotoneaster alongside our house. The bees were all over it in the summer, and this winter the berries will be eaten by blackbirds, thrushes and, with a bit of luck, waxwings. Always use peat-free compost. Having a water butt will help with watering during dry summer periods. Creating wild arable flower plots and growing wild birdseed mixes provides a natural source of food for wildlife. Although this is my picture, this isn't my garden. This is Valençay in the Loire region of France. When creating the flower meadow, usually 20 grams per square metre of wildflowers and fine grass seed mixes will be sufficient depending on soil type. Early flowering bulbs will add colour to the lawn. There are two kinds of flower meadow, spring and summer. Spring meadows contain flowers such as cowslips and lady's smock, which bloom between April and May. They may also contain bulbs such as daffodils and fritillaries. Spring meadows should not be mown until after the flowers have seeded in June. The meadow may need to be topped again in September to a minimum height of 18 inches. Summer meadows contain flowers such as knapweeds, cranebills and oxeye daisies, which bloom between July and August. They should be mown until May and then left until early September, by which time the flowers will have seeded. Small quantities of short grass cuttings can be left on the lawn. They can, along with the small amounts of leaves, be drawn into the underground tunnels of earthworms. Think carefully before taking drastic action to restore what you might see as a neglected lawn. They're often rich in wildlife and may contain orchids and other scarce plants. They also contain anthills, which we tend to think of as ants as pests, but they are beneficial predators of less welcome garden insects and are fed on by birds and other wildlife. Many larger species of plant are valuable for wildlife. For example, hawthorn grows quickly into a thick, thorny bush. It provides shelter for insects, and the flowers are an important source of nectar for them. Birds like to feed on its berries and the insects that are attracted to the plant. It also provides a safe nesting and roosting site for birds. Honeysuckle provides insects and shelter and a rich source of nectar from its flowers. The birds and mammals like to feed on its fruits. Silver birch trees are quick growing and their seeds are liked by a number of birds. Trees, shrubs and climbers are important features in the garden for their aesthetic appeal and as sources of food and shelter for wildlife. The size of your garden will limit what you can plant, but most gardens can support at least one small tree and a few shrubs. Having a mixture of native and non-native species is fine. However, native deciduous trees, shrubs and climbers are particularly beneficial. The type of soil and the aspect of your garden will have an influence on which plants can grow there. Look around your neighbourhood to see which species appear to grow well. Where possible, it is cheaper to buy plants without pots, bare-rooted plants. Plant trees, shrubs and climbers between late October and early March, but preferably before the end of December. Planting a mixture of different trees and shrubs is a natural and sustainable way to provide year-round food for wildlife. Flowering plants will bring colour and vibrancy to any garden, and even the smallest balcony or terrace, and provide nectar, seeds and cover for wildlife. These versatile plants can grow readily both in the ground and in containers. Carol planted this at the start of November. Underneath these polyanthus are some spring bulbs. Different flowers need to be planted at different times. Look at the instructions on the packet. Single petal varieties are of most benefit to insects. Many modern hybrids with multiple layers of petals look attractive but are often not as rich in nectar and pollen. Foxtail millet is an ornamental grass much liked by some seed-eating birds such as house sparrows. Knapweeds are attractive to many different species, particularly bees, butterflies, moths and hoverflies. Sunflowers are attracted to bees, butterflies and hoverflies, and birds feed on the seeds. A thick, well-managed hedge provides wildlife with a place to shelter and breed, as well as a source of food. Thorny hedges offer the most shelter and protection for wildlife. Please make sure that your hedges are native species. Chop down that lilandii. Do not cut hedges during the nesting season, that's March to the end of August. This is covered by Section 1 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act of 1981. A mixed hedge provides a range of different leafing, flowering and fruiting times. As a guide, use 50% hawthorn, 30% blackthorn and a mix of elder, field maple, dog rose and privet. However, check what is growing locally. Roof areas can also be an important resource and refuge for wildlife. Mosses and lichens grow naturally on most roofs, but a green roof is intentionally designed to support vegetation. Green roofs have been used extensively on the continent and are now becoming more popular in the UK. House sparrows, starlings, house martins and swifts regularly depend on buildings for their nesting sites. The last two species are almost completely dependent upon them. Swifts are particularly vulnerable to loss of nest sites during building repair and renovation. Once lost from a traditional site, it's hard to entice birds back. If you find that you must replace fascias and soffits that cover existing holes or have nests attached, ask the builder to make a new hole and fit an internal box at the same point as the existing nest site. It's really pleasing to see that many new builds are now incorporating hollow bricks into their buildings. Which brings us on to nest boxes. Nest boxes provide hole nesting birds with a safe place to rear their young and create an opportunity for you to see birds close up. Try to place the boxes high up, preferably under the eaves, and ensure that the box commands a good all-round view and that there is a clear flight path to the nest. Site the box so it faces between east and north to avoid strong direct sunlight and prevailing wind and rain. If providing homes for house martins and swallows, the nest should be located and secured in the appropriate location for the respective species, either beneath the eaves or on a beam inside the building. Avoid placing them above doors and windows. Bottom left is a swift box I made earlier this year. They should be located at least 5 metres above the ground. Unfortunately, when I made the box we went into lockdown and I don't have a 5-metre ladder. I hope to get it in place sometime this winter. Several types of mammal can be found in the gardens of the UK, and what species you can attract will depend on where you live, the surrounding landscapes and available habitats. Our frequent visitors include bats, hedgehogs and grey squirrels. In my experience, grey squirrels need no encouragement to come into your garden, so I'm not going to mention them again. There are 17 species of bat in the UK. The most abundant of these, and the most likely one to use the bat boxes, is the common pipistrelle. It is the UK's smallest bat and weighs the same as just 10 paper clips. These fascinating animals can be helped by providing an abundance of insects in your garden. Erecting bat boxes can help by providing alternative roosting sites for these creatures. Make sure there are no branches around the box, as bats like an uncluttered flight path to and from their roost. Once installed, don't open the box. Bats are protected by law, and a special licence is required to disturb or handle them. I have to show this stoat that recently visited our garden. Encourage hedgehogs through appropriate garden management. Shrub beds and borders with a thick cover of plants provide safe foraging areas and shelter for roosting and hibernation. Hedgehogs also forage extensively on lawns. Maintaining different lengths of grass, as I've said before, gives them a wide choice of insect foods on which to feed. Another way that you can encourage hedgehogs to spend more time in your garden is by providing them with a home. You can either build one yourself, like this one in our garden, or alternatively, you can purchase ready-made hedgehog nesting boxes from reputable wildlife organisations such as the RSPB. Homes for insects. Try to provide plants such as alyssum, borage, knapweeds and sweet williams that will offer sources of nectar throughout the year, not just at the height of summer. Insects seek out man-made structures in which to lay their eggs to use as a shelter during winter hibernation. These range from wood piles, garden canes and furniture to holes in brickwork, garden sheds and other buildings. I'm sure we've all seen the commercially available bug hotels, but it is possible to make your own using bricks, old wood drilled with holes, straw, brown paper and broken pots. Here's one my grandchildren helped build at RSPB Fairburn Ings a few years ago. Homes for amphibians and reptiles. A well-managed garden containing a well-structured lawn and good cover in borders, plenty of rocks and dead wood, and a pond should provide lots of natural places in which amphibians and reptiles can shelter, bask and hibernate. However, you may wish to provide one of the many commercially available froggy tats, or construct a hibernacular for reptiles. You can find instructions for these online. Finally, we come to the part where we consider what to feed our birds. Food shortages can occur in any season. Feeding throughout the year will attract birds to your garden and give them a better chance to survive periods of food shortages. Although beneficial, feeding does not replace the important natural foods birds can find in a well-managed garden, particularly through the breeding season. Let's have a closer look at your birds and what you're likely to see in your garden. They essentially come in two types. If you look at the beaks, you can see they come in two distinct shapes. On the left is a goldfinch. Its beak is adapted for eating seeds. The beak enables the bird to shred off the husk of a seed and get to the good bit inside. On the right, you can see that the wren has a very different shape to its beak. This type of bird is an insectivore. It would much rather be eating insects, but even when their natural food is not available, this is when they'll visit your feeders. Over the summer, someone asked me, where have all the birds gone? I've not seen any in my garden for weeks. I explained that the birds weren't there because they were able to get their food elsewhere, in a more natural form. As I've said before, if you have a wildlife garden, then these birds are less likely to disappear because they'll find the insects in your garden. There now follows the top 10 birds from the 2020 Big Garden Birdwatch. Based on what I've just told you, you should be able to tell me what they prefer to eat. Now this is the interactive part of the presentation. I'll pause on each slide to give you time to shout out the answer. Number 1 is the house sparrow. This feeds on seeds and scraps. Number 2, starling. Invertebrates and fruit. 3, blue tit. This little bird prefers insects and caterpillars, but will eat any seeds and nuts that you put out. Number 4, wood pigeon. This bird eats crops like cabbages, sprouts, peas and grain. If you have an allotment, you won't be a fan of wood pigeons. It also eats buds and shoots, and it'll attack the seeds and nuts and berries that you put out. 5, blackbird. This ground-feeding bird prefers insects, worms and berries. 6, goldfinch. This bird eats seeds, but will eat insects in the summer. 7, great tit. Like the blue tit, prefers insects, but will devour seeds and nuts. 8, robin. It'll eat worms, insects and other invertebrates, and when available, seeds and fruits as well. 9, long-tailed tit. Eats insects, but will occasionally eat seeds in the autumn and winter. 10, magpie. This omnivore and scavenger will eat pretty much anything. Number 11, chaffinch. As can be seen from the beak, it's primarily a seed eater, but it will eat insects. What's this? When I ask this question, I often get the answer sparrow. It is in fact a dunnock. Look at the beak. This dunnock is a regular visitor to our garden. In 20 years, I've only seen one sparrow. So we put food out to supplement the natural foodstuffs that birds can find in our garden. Let's look at the choices available. There are different mixes for feeders and for bird tables and ground feeding. The better mixtures contain plenty of flaked maize, sunflower seeds and peanut granules. Small seeds such as millet attract mostly house sparrows, dunnocks, finches, reed buntings and collared doves, while flaked maize is taken readily by blackbirds. Tits and greenfinches favour peanuts and sunflower seeds. Mixes that contain chunks or whole nuts are suitable for winter feeding only. Pinhead oatmeal is excellent for many birds. Be careful if the feed mix contains wheat and barley grains. They're really only suitable for pigeons, doves and pheasants, which feed on the ground and rapidly increase in numbers, frequently deterring the smaller species. Avoid seed mixtures that have split peas, beans, dried rice or lentils, as again only the large species can eat them. These are added to some cheaper seed mixes to bulk them up. Any mixture containing green or pink lumps should also be avoided, as these are dog biscuits which can only be eaten when soaked. Sunflower seeds. These are an excellent year-round food and in many areas are even more popular than peanuts. The oil content is higher in black than striped ones, and so they are much better. Sunflower hearts, that's the husk kernels, are a popular no-mess food. They are my favourite because the entire seed is eaten and we don't get husks or other waste littering our ground. Niger seeds. These are small and black with a high oil content. They need a special type of seed feeder and are particular favourites with goldfinches and siskins. Having said that, I've stopped using these seeds. A few years ago, they did indeed attract goldfinches into the garden. However, the goldfinches very quickly discovered the sunflower hearts and left the Niger seeds alone. Never touched them again. Peanuts. Crushed or grated nuts attract robins, dunnocks and even wrens. Nuthatches and coal tits may hoard peanuts. Salted or dry roasted peanuts should not be used. Peanuts can be high in a natural toxin which can kill birds, so buy from a reputable dealer, such as our online shop, to guarantee freedom from aflatoxin. Fat balls and other fat-based food bars are an excellent winter food. If they are sold in nylon mesh bags, always remove the bag before putting the fat ball out. The soft mesh can trap and injure birds. You can make your own bird cake. Recipes can be found online. Mealworms are relished by robins and blue tits and may attract other insect-eating birds such as pied wagtails. Mealworms are a natural food and can be used to feed birds throughout the year. It can become quite expensive to constantly buy mealworms, and many people want to grow their own. You can culture your own mealworms. If you can't face this performance, buy your mealworms from the professionals, consoling yourself with the thought that successful mealworm breeding is even more difficult than it sounds. It is particularly important that any mealworms fed to the birds are fresh. Any dead or discoloured ones must not be used, as they can cause problems such as salmonella poisoning. Dog and cat food. Meaty tinned dog and cat food form an acceptable substitute to earthworms during the warm, dry part of the summer when worms are beyond the bird's reach. Blackbirds readily take dog food and even feed it to their chicks. Dry biscuits are not recommended, as birds may choke on the hard lumps. Soaked dog biscuit is excellent except in hot weather, as it quickly dries out. Pet food can attract larger birds such as magpie and gulls, and also neighbourhood cats. If this is likely to be a problem, it's best avoided. Never give milk to any bird. A bird's gut is not designed to digest milk, and it can result in serious stomach upsets or even death. Birds can, however, digest fermented dairy products such as cheese. Mild grated cheese can be a good way of attracting robins, wrens and dunnocks. Give fresh coconut only in the shell. Rinse out any residues of the sweet coconut water from the middle of the coconut before hanging it out to prevent the build-up of black mildew. Choose the best feeder for you. Nut feeders are made of steel mesh and are the only safe method of offering nuts to wild birds. The mesh size needs to be large enough to prevent beak damage and small enough to prevent large pieces of nut from being removed. Young birds can choke on whole nuts. At this point, I should remind you to regularly clean your feeders, particularly in the winter when rain seeping in can cause the dry food to go mouldy. In fact, when filling feeders at this time of year, I suggest only putting in enough food for 2 or 3 days at a time. Seed feeders are tubular transparent containers with holes through which birds can access the seed. They're designed for sunflower seeds and seed mixtures labelled feeder seed. They will attract tits, siskins and greenfinches. I said I wouldn't mention squirrels again, but in this picture you can see 2 deterrents, a cage around the feeder and a baffler. That's the dome in the bottom right. The latter works well in preventing the squirrel from climbing the pole. It doesn't, however, stop it from jumping from the wall. Niger seeds is smaller and needs a special type of seed feeder. They're particularly popular with goldfinches and siskins. Hopper type feeders with trays or flat surfaces are suited to general cereal-based mixes, although any seed mix can be used. They will attract a similar range of birds to a bird table. Make sure that all feeders drain easily and do not allow the build-up of old food with the associated health risks. Homemade devices. Half coconuts and tip bells filled with fat, bird cake, etc. can be hung from your bird table, a tree, or from a bracket on a wall. They will attract greenfinches, house sparrows and tits. Ground feeders. They keep your lawn clean. A bird table allows ground feeding birds to eat in more safety. But remember, don't put peanuts on these feeders. This is our setup. As can be seen, the only seed we use are sunflower hearts. That's because there's no waste that falls on the floor and rots. We have a bird bath nearby. The extra twigs are to allow for queuing and for me to get more natural photographs of the birds. This is a linnet that's become a regular visitor over the past couple of years. Thank you for listening. A lot of the information from this evening's talk came from the RSPB's Home for Wildlife pack. If there are any particular aspects of this talk that you would like more details of, feel free to drop me an email.